Well, I've discussed China's population in several programs, and consistent said that it's absolutely not the official 1.4 billion, and it's no more than 100 million. And also, I don't want to come across as sensational by making unsubstantiated claims. That said, a number of viewers have written to me, sharing their thoughts and information on the matter. I decide to finally confront the question head on. China's real population is not anywhere near 800 million either. It's somewhere between 300 and 400 million. Yes, you heard that right. China's actual population may be only a fraction of the official 1.4 billion. I believe we need a two-step approach to estimate China's real population. First, we must rectify China's real population before the pandemic. And then we must determine China's real death toll during COVID. So, first things first, what is China's population before the pandemic? In 2018, the Russians estimated that China's actual population may be between 500 million and 800 million. A Russian expert noted that China's population in 1945, during the nationalist rule, was 490 million. After the Communist Party implemented the Great Leap Forward, which resulted in the Great Famine and the subsequent Cultural Revolution, causing countless deaths and injuries, followed by decades of the one-child policy, it's impossible that China's population surged to 1.4 billion. Other Russian experts added up the publicly available urban population of every Chinese city and county and got only 280 million people. And based on the traditional urban-rural population ratio of 1 to 1, they estimated China's actual population being around 560 million. Even considering China's unique circumstances, they say that the population should not exceed 800 million. So, and then Japanese scholars have done research based on China's table salt consumption, arable land, and international grain purchases, and concluded that China's real population was between 800 and 900 million. In my December 14th, 2024 program, which was cut based on my October 8th live stream, I showed you China's real population before the pandemic was between 695 million to 890 million. My logic was straightforward. It is that, well, 35 years ago, China and India's population was only 270 million people apart. In 1990, India had 870 million people, while China had a population of 1.1 billion. In the next 30 years, India's fertility rate averaged 3. That means every woman on average gives birth or gave birth during that 30 years to 3 children, while China's official fertility rate was only half of India's at 1.7. Therefore, mathematically, it's impossible that India, a much younger country with double the fertility, still has a smaller population than China does in a span of 30 years. So using AI and official CCP fertility rate, I came up with 890 million Chinese population for the year 2020. However, if I use Dr. Yi Fuxian, a renowned expert on Chinese demographics, if I used his fertility rates, China's population in 2020, before the pandemic, was only 695 million. So you see my calculation. The studies conducted by the Russians and the Japanese overwhelmingly point China's population before the pandemic at somewhere between 600 million and 800 million or 900 million, but it's around 800 million. And there's another expert who agrees with our number. A Chinese YouTuber by the name of Li Muyang, who has 1 million subscribers, disclosed in his March 1st and March 8th programs information he received from one of his fans. This fan has been working for the WHO for decades and does data collection and analytic work. He has been studying China's population for a while. And in 2020, 2021, this fan of Mr. Li tried to repeat the Russian study by adding up all official population data at local levels. But he wasn't able to do so because many of the local governments had stopped releasing demographic data. and some even fabricated the information. So he wasn't able to finish his study, but he concluded that China's population before the pandemic was 750 million. Do I agree with this number? Well, I think it's logical. My estimation of China's population before the pandemic, according to my AI model, was between 700 million to almost 900 million. So I like to be conservative. Um, I would say China's population before the pandemic was 800 million. All right, so we answered the first question. The next question is how many people died from COVID? Now, the person who works for WHO also did his estimates. And he said, and this is what he wrote, as of now, China's population is between 310 to 320 million. He derived at this number based on his calculation of a 430 million COVID death toll. Okay, and how did he get his calculation? Okay, let me tell you. This is his math. He said, before the pandemic, Chinese Ministry of Civil Affairs said that on average, 10 million people die every year, with the winter months serving the highest fatalities at about 1 million per month. And according to people who work in the Chinese funeral industry, their workload grew 8 to 10 times during COVID. Now, this growth, however, does not include people who died in the countryside and were buried by their family locally. So this 8 to 10 times tenfold growth does not include the spillover death that were absorbed in the countryside, through the local burials, right? Based on his calculation, considering all facts, he said China's monthly deaths during COVID has been on average 7 million per month for the first 3 years from early 2020 to the end of 2022, before zero COVID abruptly ended. So if you do the math, that's 252 million people who died in the first 3 years of COVID. And then after the lockdown ended at the end of 2022, China experienced an upsurge in COVID related fatalities from the end of 2022 to early months of 2023. And he estimated another 120 million Chinese died during that period. And his number is based on some internal data from Beijing's police department. So in January of 2023, at least 8,000 to 10,000 people died daily in hospitals in Beijing. And this didn't include people who died at home, in hotels, schools, or other dormitories. A lot of Chinese live in work provided dormitories. And the same number in Tianjin was 5,000 deaths daily in hospitals. Now, China has over 2,000 cities and counties of various sizes. So he calculated 120 million total fatalities across China in those months. And then on top of that, he said an additional 50 million deaths should be added to the early months of COVID in 2020 to account for the initial surge in death. So if you add them up, that's 222 million total deaths from the beginning of 2020 to the end of the surge in 2023. And so when we deduct the 422 million from the 750 million, that's his number. That's where he got his estimate of China's population being at a little over 300 million right now. Now, this is the first time that someone actually attempted to calculate total COVID death in recent years. I cannot dispute his numbers, but I think there's a piece that he missed. That is, his 422 million death, only covers from the beginning of the pandemic to the early months of 2023. As of now, or in 2024 and 2025, people are still dying. So the total number of casualties may be more than his 422 million and may even reach 500 million. Now, this 500 million matches with what the founder of the spiritual practice, Falun Gong, who said in early 2023 that 400 million Chinese had died in the pandemic, and another 100 million would die until the end of the pandemic. So, what is my estimation? My estimate of Chinese population right now is somewhere between 300 million and 400 million 400 million is on the conservative side, and 300 million is an aggressive estimate. It's based on China having 800 million people before the pandemic and having lost between 400 to 500 million people so far. Now, yesterday, one of my long term viewers wrote to me. He said one of his connections from Japan told him something very interesting that he wants to share with me. His contact in Japan is a man of honorable character and is well connected to Japanese businesses in the salt industry. And this Japanese contact told my viewer that on the whole, Japan is now selling only one half of the salt to China that it did only a few years ago. So, what do you suppose that may imply about the real Chinese population? This indirectly confirms that China's population is about half of what it was before the pandemic. It indirectly supports my estimate that the population was 800 million before the pandemic and is now somewhere around 400 million. It's cut in half.